I turned 31 on April 18th, 2025, and the only birthday tradition I had managed to keep from childhood fit in the palm of my hand. It was a small blue ceramic candle holder, glazed unevenly with tiny white stars around the rim. My grandmother, Rose, had made it with me during a community pottery class when I was 8 years old. Every birthday since then, no matter where I lived, that little holder sat in front of my cake. Apartments changed. Jobs changed. Relationships changed. The blue candle holder stayed. By the time I was 31, I worked as an architectural project coordinator in downtown Columbus, Ohio. My days revolved around deadlines, permit revisions, and spreadsheets. I liked predictable things because very little about my family had ever been predictable. My boyfriend Noah understood that. Without telling me, he'd spent nearly 3 weeks planning a quiet birthday dinner. He coordinated schedules with my closest friends, convinced my grandmother to bake her famous lemon cake, and even borrowed the blue candle holder from my kitchen shelf that morning so it could be waiting beside the cake at the restaurant. He told me later he'd wrapped it in 2 kitchen towels because he was terrified of breaking it. That detail still hurts to remember. At 7:12 p.m., I leaned forward, closed my eyes, and blew out 31 candles while everyone around me applauded softly. Exactly 1 mile away, professional movers unlocked my apartment with a spare key my mother still shouldn't have possessed. I didn't know any of that yet. I was laughing because Grandma Rose had accidentally gotten frosting on Noah's sleeve. I was opening a birthday card from my coworker. I was making a wish that, looking back now, had already become impossible. An hour later, I would unlock my apartment door and discover entire rooms missing. The couch Noah and I had saved 8 months to buy. My dining table. My bookshelves. Boxes labeled winter clothes, kitchen, and important documents. Gone. The only thing left sitting neatly in the middle of my empty living room was the tiny blue ceramic candle holder. And outside my window, a white moving truck was disappearing around the corner before I even understood why it had been there. Here's what my mother didn't know about that night, and about the 23 years that led up to it. She thought she was moving furniture. She had actually moved the final piece of my loyalty. In my family, love had always been measured in square footage. My mother, Linda, never said those exact words, but she lived by them with religious consistency. The person with the biggest house hosted every holiday. The child with the nicest furniture was introduced to neighbors first. Success wasn't something she celebrated quietly, it was a ranking system she updated constantly. She loved saying things like, "People can tell how much you value yourself by what you own." My older brother, Jason, bought a 4-bedroom house at 29, and suddenly every family dinner happened there. When I rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment close to work, Mom called it a temporary phase for nearly 4 years. The blue candle holder was the only tradition that ignored her rules. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't impressive. It couldn't raise anyone's status. Grandma Rose always placed it beside my birthday cake with the same gentle smile, as if reminding me that some things were valuable simply because they had been loved for a long time. She was 78 then, her hands slightly unsteady from arthritis, but every April she still baked my favorite lemon cake from scratch. She grated every lemon by hand because she insisted bottled juice never tasted like celebration. I used to think everyone saw how quietly extraordinary she was. Now I know many people only notice the loudest person in the room. For years, that person had been my mother. And for years, I helped everyone pretend that was normal. I wish I could tell you I saw the warning signs that afternoon. The truth is, I saw them. I just explained them away. At 10:06 a.m., I texted Mom. Dinner starts at 6:30. Noah's planned everything, so please don't stop by the apartment. We'll be home around 8:30. She answered 2 minutes later. Of course. At 1:41 p.m., she asked if she could leave a birthday gift inside my apartment while I was out. No need, I replied. Just bring it next week. We're locking up before we leave. Noah looked over my shoulder and smiled. That should settle it. I thought so too. Then, just before we left the apartment at 5:52 p.m., Mom called. I've been thinking, she said in that calm voice she always used before ignoring someone's boundaries. Your place has become awfully cluttered. I laughed nervously. It really hasn't. You'd be surprised what fresh eyes notice. I've got it under control. She paused long enough to make me uncomfortable before saying the sentence I'd heard my entire life. I'm only doing what's best for this family. It sounded harmless. It always did. I thanked her for calling, hung up, grabbed my purse, and followed Noah downstairs. Looking back, I remember hesitating with my hand on the apartment door. I almost turned the key twice instead of once. Almost. Dinner was exactly what I'd hoped for. There were only 8 of us around the table. Grandma Rose sat beside Noah, pretending she hadn't baked the lemon cake herself until everyone complimented it. My best friend, Hannah, had brought old printed photographs from college. Someone ordered sparkling cider because they knew I didn't drink much. For 2 hours, life felt uncomplicated. Then my phone buzzed. 8:14 p.m. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Is this Emily Carter? Yes. This is Michael with Premier Moving Services. I frowned. I'm sorry. We've completed today's pickup, but one inventory item couldn't be loaded because it wasn't listed on the work order. My stomach tightened. What pickup? There was silence. Then papers shuffled. The apartment on East Willow Street. I stopped hearing the restaurant. The conversations disappeared. Even the birthday music faded. I think you have the wrong person. No, ma'am. The authorization was signed by Linda Carter, identifying herself as the property owner's representative. My mother. She said everything inside was being relocated to a storage unit because you were transitioning out. I stood so quickly my chair tipped backward. Noah caught it before it hit the floor. What happened? He asked. I couldn't answer. The moving supervisor kept talking. We left one small ceramic item because the client specifically instructed us not to pack anything fragile without written approval. My heart dropped. The blue candle holder. The only thing Grandma had ever made with me. It was still sitting there. Everything else was gone. Grandma Rose quietly folded her napkin. She didn't cry. She simply placed one wrinkled hand over mine. So, she said softly, almost to herself, she finally decided your home belonged to her too. That sentence unlocked years of memories I had carefully labeled as misunderstandings. Mom returning clothes I'd bought because she didn't approve. Throwing away childhood journals while cleaning. Giving my furniture to Jason without asking because he needed it more. Walking into every apartment I'd ever rented as though walls and locks were polite suggestions. None of those moments had been accidents. They had been rehearsals. And every time I told myself, that's just how Mom is. Every time I asked everyone else to be patient with her. I wasn't just the person she hurt. I had become the person who made it easier for her to keep hurting everyone else. That realization hurt far more than the empty apartment waiting for me across town. Noah paid the restaurant bill before I even remembered it existed. The drive back to my apartment took 11 minutes, but it felt suspended outside of time. I kept unlocking my phone, hoping another message would appear explaining that this was all a misunderstanding. Instead, there was one new text from Mom, sent at 8:19 p.m. Asterisk, you'll thank me once everything is organized. I'm only doing what's best for this family. Asterisk. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. When we reached the building, the lobby echoed differently. My footsteps sounded louder than I remembered. Apartment 4B looked exactly the same from the hallway, but inside it barely resembled my home. The living room was almost empty. Only the blue ceramic candle holder sat on the hardwood floor, exactly where the moving supervisor had described it. Noah bent down, picked it up carefully, and placed it in my hands without saying a word. Grandma Rose slowly walked through each room. She opened empty closets, looked at bare walls where photographs had hung that morning, and quietly closed every door behind her. I've lived long enough, she finally said, to know this wasn't cleaning. I nodded. It was permission. The next morning I called my older brother, Jason. He sighed before I finished explaining. Emily, don't make this into a bigger deal. They emptied my apartment. Mom probably rented storage. Just go get your stuff. She never asked. You know how she is. There it was again. The sentence that had protected her for decades. After hanging up, I called my Aunt Denise. She listened politely before saying, "Your mother means well. Maybe this is her strange way of helping." Helping. I looked around at an apartment without a couch, without dishes, without the desk where I'd worked from home for 3 years. Nothing about it felt like help. For a moment I wondered if maybe everyone else was right. Maybe I was overreacting. Then Noah walked out of the bedroom carrying an empty picture frame. "They even took the photographs out," he said quietly. "Not just the furniture. The memories." That was when my phone rang again. It was Michael, the moving supervisor. "I hope you don't mind me calling," he said carefully. "Something about yesterday didn't sit right with my crew." "What do you mean?" "We're required to photograph every room before and after a move. Your mother told us you were already living somewhere else." I wasn't. I figured that out when I saw birthday decorations on the kitchen counter and a cake order receipt with today's date. He paused. "We also have copies of the work authorization she signed." I closed my eyes. "Can you send them to me?" "I already have." Seconds later, an email arrived. There it was. Mom's signature. Her driver's license. The contract. The address of the storage facility. Everything documented. For the first time since the phone call at the restaurant, I wasn't relying on emotions anymore. I had facts. That afternoon, I drafted a message to my mother. The first version read, "Asterisk, you've spent my entire life treating me like property. Stay away from me. Asterisk." I deleted it. The second version was even harsher. Asterisk, if one thing is missing, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Asterisk. Delete. I set my phone down for 15 minutes. When I picked it up again, I wrote only what needed to be said. Asterisk, Mom, I have the moving contract, the inventory list, your signed authorization, and witness statements. Please send me the storage unit number and access code by 5 p.m. today. If you choose not to, I'll recover my property through the proper legal process. I hope you choose cooperation instead. Asterisk. No accusations. No insults. Just facts. Her reply arrived 3 minutes later. Asterisk, you're embarrassing this family over a misunderstanding. Remember who has always stood by you. Asterisk. I looked at the message once. Then I locked my phone. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't trying to earn a better place inside my mother's version of the family anymore. I was beginning to build a life where I didn't need her permission to feel at home. I didn't file a lawsuit that afternoon. I could have. Instead, I filed a police report documenting the unauthorized removal of my belongings and asked my attorney to send a formal demand letter. My only request was simple. Everything taken from apartment 4B had to be returned exactly as it had been removed. Nothing more. Nothing less. The movers, embarrassed by what had happened, delivered every item back 48 hours later at no charge. Michael personally supervised the unloading, checking each numbered inventory tag against the original list. Out of 186 documented items, only 1 coffee mug had been chipped. He apologized for that mug 3 separate times. I told him the mug wasn't what had been broken. Word spread through the family much faster than my mother expected. Not because I told everyone. Because documents speak more quietly and more convincingly than arguments. A week later, Noah and a handful of friends helped me put the apartment back together. Nothing went exactly where it had been before. The couch faced a different wall. The bookshelves moved into the dining area. The bedroom felt larger after we rearranged everything. Somehow, it finally looked like my apartment instead of the one I'd been trying to keep acceptable for someone else's approval. That Saturday, Grandma Rose carried another homemade lemon cake through my front door. She smiled when she saw the little blue ceramic candle holder waiting on the table. "I think it belongs here," she said. "So do I." The birthday celebration we'd lost the week before happened anyway. 9 people squeezed into a living room that still smelled faintly of cardboard boxes. Someone burned the garlic bread. Noah forgot to buy enough forks. We laughed harder than we had at the restaurant because nothing about the evening was trying to impress anyone. Later, Hannah quietly showed me a social media photo she'd received from a cousin. My mother's dinner. Crystal glasses. Perfect table settings. 12 chairs. Only 5 guests. The room looked expensive. It didn't look warm. About 3 months later, Mom appeared at my apartment without calling first. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to open the door. I finished washing the dishes. I dried my hands. I waited nearly 6 minutes before letting her inside. She immediately reached for familiar territory. "You've made me look like a terrible mother." I didn't answer. Then she tried guilt. "You've divided this family." Still nothing. Silence forced her somewhere I'd never seen her go before. Finally, she asked one quiet question. "Do you really believe you don't need me anymore?" I looked toward the kitchen, where Grandma Rose was making tea. "I've always needed a mother," I said calmly. "What I don't need is someone who believes love gives them ownership." Then I gave her the only condition I had. "If you want to be part of this family again, your first real apology isn't for me." She already knew who I meant. Grandma Rose. The two of them sat together on the balcony for nearly an hour. I never listened. I never asked exactly what was said. Some conversations deserve privacy more than witnesses. When they came back inside, both women had red eyes. Grandma simply nodded once. That was enough. A year has passed since my 31st birthday. Every April 18th, Noah, Grandma Rose, our friends, Jason, Aunt Denise, and now, sometimes even Mom, gather in my apartment for homemade lemon cake. There is no assigned seating, no ranking, no discussion about whose house is bigger or whose furniture costs more. Everyone brings one homemade dish, even if it's imperfect. The first time Mom arrived carrying a slightly lopsided apple pie she'd baked herself instead of something expensive from a bakery, she quietly set it beside Grandma's cake without comparing them. It was a tiny gesture, but it was the first one that asked for equality instead of attention. The blue ceramic candle holder still sits in the middle of the table every year. Not because it's valuable, because it reminds us what survived. When I blew out 31 candles that night, I thought my mother had emptied my apartment. What she really emptied was the last place where fear still lived. And I've learned that the strongest home isn't the one nobody can enter, it's the one nobody can control except the people who build it together.